Representative Mike Simpson, how are you, sir?
Good. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing well. I finally made it here. I'm sorry for taking
You seem to be a little busy and flabbergasted here with everything that's going on.
DC is a train wreck. Like, I'm used to hiding underneath, in the closet basement that you see.
Yeah, yeah.
But I know exactly where it is. So wandering through tunnels, I mean, it's subterranean, so I felt comfortable. But everything else is a little out there.
Well, it is. If you could have been here during the shutdown, it was a lot peacer and peaceful and calmer here because nobody was around. Our staffs were still working, but there weren't meetings coming in. In fact, there was only like 2 doors open to the buildings and that kind of stuff.
There we go. Well, now the calm is over and I'm here.
Yeah, now the calm is over and things are getting back to normal as they should.
I know today's a working day. Thanks for taking the time. There are a couple really big things that almost everybody I talk to in Idaho, cross industry, are really concerned about. One is water, right? Obviously, and one is power. And then there's a third that's tied to all the things that use water and power, which is labor, right? Because ag needs both power and water. There is a large concern specifically about the burden of managing water infrastructure and paying for water infrastructure in the state of Idaho, that a lot of people are like, look, man, the proper role of government is to only engage in things that people cannot do for themselves. And when you talk about the scale and the overall benefit that some of these water projects are really starting to propose, there's a big question of, okay, is this something that should be tackled by an individual state, or is this something that comes to the federal government and we say, like, hey, look, this is what we need, this is what we think we can do, these are the benefits across the nation or the West that we could get. What do you think about water infrastructure in Idaho?
It has traditionally been, dams have been built by either the Bureau of Reclamation or by the Army Corps of Engineers, paid for by the users of the water. They pay for the dam construction over a period of years and stuff. But that initial investment is made by the taxpayers and those types of things. And things we're looking at now in terms of recharge, that kind of stuff, we have to use the canals, and those are controlled by the Army Corps of Engineers and those types of things. So the federal government is actually involved in it. And also what the states are enforcing are federal laws. When it's the Clean Water Act, the Clean Drinking Water Act, the Clean Air Act, any of those types of things are federal laws. And so if they're going to be an imposition on the state and the taxpayers of that state, the federal government ought to pay for some of it, which is what they're doing. And that's why this Waters of the United States announcement that we had today, a press conference with the EPA, is such a huge issue. Over the years, it's been, who controls the waters of the United States and what are the waters of the United States? It was, if it was a navigable stream, navigable river, then it was a water of the United States controlled by the EPA, and they could determine what the measurements were of what could be in the water, et cetera, and all that kind of stuff. The Supreme Court a couple times says, we don't understand your definition of what is navigable. Navigable to what? And it's been, for 20 years, I've been trying to get this changed or addressed to bring some certainty and reliability to water users in Idaho, whether it's ranchers or farmers or businesses or any landowners and stuff. Then a Sackett decision was made by the Supreme Court 2 years ago in Idaho, and the Supreme Court upheld the decision. And the EPA is now taking it up to rewrite the rules for the waters of the United States to make it predictable for those landowners and stuff. We don't want the EPA regulating a pond on your farm,
If it's navigable.
Yeah.
Per whatever definition.
Yeah, per whatever definition. And it's hard to define sometimes, but people will say, well, you don't care about clean water. No, it's that those waters that are not regulated by the EPA doesn't mean they're unregulated. Just means they're regulated by the state. And nobody cares more about clean water in Idaho than the state of Idaho and the citizens of Idaho. So they can regulate those waters. We don't need the EPA coming in or the federal government coming in and tell us how we use every drop of water in Idaho. That's just inappropriate. And so I've been working on this for 20 years, and we finally got a press conference this morning with a new rule that's coming out. It's a 45-day comment period, and I'll be excited to see what the comments are from people.
So if there's no dissension, or if the dissension or negative comments are addressed accordingly and appropriately, then presumably the new rules would go into effect, and Idaho would have more, or some waterways in Idaho would have a more sovereign kind of capacity to regulate themselves, fewer federal regulations on them, and of course then the people of Idaho can determine what the quality of water they want is.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And the reason you have federal regulation is if you take the Snake River's in Idaho,
Sure.
goes through between Idaho and Oregon, and then it goes into Washington. So it is a waterway. If we polluted it in Idaho, it's going to affect Washington as that water moves downstream. So we have federal regulations of interstate waterways and those kind of things.
Sure.
And they always determine if it's a navigable river. Navigable to what? Steamboat? To a canoe? To, what is navigable mean? That's why the Supreme Court has said twice, you guys need to redefine this so that we understand what you're doing.
Gotcha. So, and again, we have with water infrastructure and the recharge there, I was actually just talking to Representative Fulcher about, he has a bill that's trying to ease the burden of regulatory red tape around transporting water in canals to recharge sites. Great.
Yep.
So that allows us to fill up the underground water bottle more effectively,
Yep.
or more easily, gives the water board more control of that. For physical infrastructure, the idea then, it sounds like you're saying, look, if you wanted to, improve the retention capacity of existing dams or reservoirs, if you want to build new ones, rebuild old ones, do whatever you want to do, the idea would be that the upfront cost would be bared by the federal government, and then over a period of time, the water users of Idaho would pay them back slowly, like a gigantic car loan or mortgage.
Yeah, if it is an irrigation infrastructure, like a dam for irrigation purposes, save water for irrigations, is done by the
Army Corps of Engineers or
No.
Bureau of Reclamation?
Bureau of Reclamation. That's right.
Dude, I could never get those. It's like
Bureau of
I'm out.
Reclamation. They do though.
Yeah.
If it's flood control, dam,
gotcha.
that's the Army Corps of Engineers and stuff.
Gotcha.
And then I do the funding for those things in the energy and water bill and stuff. And so, but it depends on what the people of Idaho want to do. We need to have a discussion in Idaho. Do you want to do you want to raise the height of dams so that you can actually store more water? And the higher it actually gets, you get more storage of water in it and stuff. So if you could raise the level 6 feet, 10 feet, you're going to store a whole lot more water. That means if you've got the water. Remember, we live in a high plains desert. So what God gives us in terms of snow and rain is what determines whether we're going to have that water or stuff. But we're also pumping out our aquifer at an alarming rate, and that rate keeps going down and down and down, or the level of the aquifer keeps going down. And we need to recharge that aquifer and bring it up. It's the best place to store water is in the aquifer. If you put storage of water in a reservoir, which is an appropriate thing to do, but you know what the biggest use of it is?
Evaporation?
Evaporation. Underground, it doesn't evaporate. So storage in the aquifer is very, very important. And as you know, we have conflicts in Idaho between surface water users and groundwater users and that kind of stuff. And if we pump out the aquifer in the upper Snake River Valley, what does that do to the Magic Valley and the water rights that they have and stuff? Those conflicts. If you understand water law in Idaho, or in the West, you're a lot smarter than I am.
Here's a question for you, actually, to this point, considering prior appropriation. If we take a dam that's X number of feet and we add 6 feet on, first off, I think what you were saying with if you raise it, you store more water, it's because those reservoirs are shaped like a cone, right? So the last foot stores way more water than the first foot down here.
Yep.
So if we take, whatever the dam is, say, Anderson Ranch, right? You raise it 6 feet. That last 6 feet is actually subject to prior appropriations as well, and because it's, new water storage. But if you take a completely new area and create a new reservoir out of that, that presumably would fill up, or at least some portion of it every year. Does that fall under the same regulations as the last 6 feet of say, like Anderson Ranch?
That would be a good question. And if I was a water attorney, I might be able to answer it, but I don't know if
I got to get some back on.
The problem is, if you take water and use it to fill up a new reservoir, say, does that decrease the amount of water that is available downstream for people that might have prior water rights, or earlier water rights than you. So are you taking water from? I mean, those are conflicts that have to be worked out in the courts and through the water users, and they work very hard to do that. But I tell you what, water law in the West we have what's called a prior appropriation doctrine. In the East Coast, they have riparian rights. They have so much water, they're trying to get rid of it in most places. And if water runs by your property or through your property, you have a right to it. In Idaho, it's when your water right occurred. The earlier the appropriation, the earlier the water right, the more right you have to your appropriation and stuff. So it's a complicated issue. I mean, really complicated.
Yeah, that's out there. So, and last question on this, and per your statement, Idaho's going to have to decide what it wants to do. Is there a process by which there would be like a ballot measure or a question amongst water users where everybody says like, okay, look, $1 billion to do this project, and this is what we think we'd get out of it, and the Bureau of Reclamation's on board with it. So do you guys want to do this? It's going to cost you X number of dollars per month for the next 30 years. Is that something, is the process literally that people kind of decide in its majority vote, or is it different people within like the appropriations have to offer it and then?
I don't think it would be a vote, a popular vote on the ballot. Now, doesn't say it couldn't be.
Sure.
But you would have the water users, and I'm sure the water users would be talking to their members. And if it was going to cost them additional money, there'd probably have to be a vote among the water users of whether they wanted to incur that debt and stuff, and those types of things. But you'd get a feeling, as I have in just talking with people, or as I'm starting to, as I'm talking to people, of whether it's, as an example, the Teton Dam. A lot of people want to rebuild a Teton Dam, not necessarily where it was built before, but not excluding that, but maybe looking at other places and stuff. But they realize the importance of saving water in Idaho. And we try to save every drop we can. But again, it comes back to, do you have the water to save? Can you save it at a time when the water is not being used for irrigation, so consequently in the winter? Could you save the water and that type of stuff? Yeah. So there's so much that goes into water that it is way above my pay grade, way above my head.
I have appreciation for that.
But I listen to the water users. I listen to the representatives that represent those districts and stuff, and what they're hearing and stuff. So you get a feeling on what the people of Idaho want to do.
Gotcha. I spoke with Michael Dykes from International Dairy Products Association, IDAP? No, IDPA.
Okay.
Come on, God. I always, because you have like, you have the dairy, IDEX, and like, then you also have Dairy West, and like, I reviewed a bunch of them recently. Dairy obviously is, as few people know, actually, amazingly, obviously people know Idaho is an ag-centered state from an economic standpoint, but the biggest chunk of that ag is cattle, and within cattle, the biggest chunk is dairy, right? That is a huge issue within the state. As dairy goes, so Idaho goes to a degree.
The biggest, the biggest cash crop in Idaho is not potatoes. It was potatoes for a long, long time, because we're famous for our potatoes.
Right.
It's now dairy.
Taking that into consideration, I mean, obviously this is one of the biggest sectors that's struggling under the current confusion around ag labor.
Yeah.
Is there any hope or movement in the future, do you think, coming for this sector? Because again, not only is it now dairy, but that value, as you know, is increasing because of the research going into it, because of the different product lines that people are able to create, because of things that used to be considered just a byproduct of something that was useless is now actually more valuable than the original product. Like whey protein and whatnot. We're only increasing in value in the sector. At the same time, the producers and the owners of these operations were like, help, we need labor help.
I was just coming up on an elevator this morning when I came to work, and there was a couple of staff members from another office that I didn't know that got on the elevator, and they both had a cup of Chopani yogurt. I said, Chopani. I said, that's made in Idaho. And they said, really? I said, yeah. I said, it's the biggest dairy, it's the biggest yogurt factory in the world, is in Twin Falls, Idaho, the Chopani factory down there. And it is huge in the state of Idaho. But having labor, that means you got to have a lot of cows, and that means you got to have a lot of labor out there on those dairy farms. And that's an issue that has been plaguing us for a number of years. We've had a bill in that I worked on with, we had 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans work on it, called the Ag Labor Workforce Modernization Act. And it passed the House twice. This was before the pandemic. And then during the last 4 years, when the Biden administration came in, we got it, before that, we got it past the House, couldn't get it quite past the Senate yet. Close. In fact, I think the last year, if we had had another week before we adjourned, we'd probably got it done, but we didn't. And then the Biden administration came in, had the open borders, and you couldn't even mention the word immigration around here, whether it was good immigration or bad immigration. It was just bad because of the open borders. Now that this administration has closed the borders, I think we have a chance to address this issue and do an ag immigration reform bill or an H-2A visa reform, whatever you want to call it. But people will say that we are taking jobs from Americans. That's not true. In the last year, I guess it was 2020, the dairy industry across the country had like 4,000 openings. And with H-2A visas, you have to advertise those jobs and try to fill them with Americans before you can get a foreign worker through the H-2A program. Out of the 4,000 available jobs that they advertised for Americans for, you know how many they filled?
Oh, 2?
4.
Oh, double what I thought.
And three of them quit the first week. I don't know what happened to the fourth one.
Whoever thinks you're taking America, just go there for a day and say, yes, this is my best option for $17, $18 an hour, whatever it might be, $20. Like, again, no shade on those workers.
Pretty good wages.
Like, you're just go and experience it. I went to a dairy in the Magic Valley recently, and I even went to Idaho Milk Products, a giant warehouse in Jerome. Fantastic operation. It was like, wow, this is incredible. But the idea that you're just, it's like, who's signing up for these jobs? That's not reality.
Working out on a dairy farm is not you can't get Americans to take those jobs. And they're actually paying pretty damn good wages out there on the dairy farms and stuff. And so we're not taking jobs from Americans. And if you go talk to some of these people that have been working here for 10, 20 years, actually, that came undocumented and stuff. What we do in our bill is we don't grant them amnesty. What we do is we say, okay, come out of the woodwork. You pay a fine for coming here illegally. It's not a large fine, but you pay a fine because you did break the law. You came here illegally and stuff. We give you a permanent green card. We do a background check on you to make sure you're not criminal or anything like that. Don't have any criminal background in your history. We give you a permanent green card, and that way you can come and go. If your mother dies in Honduras or wherever you're from, you can go home to the funeral and you can come back and work. That's all they want, really. Is there a path to citizenship? Not an extraordinary path. There's a path that they could apply for as any other individual can apply for. They don't get to jump to the front of the line or anything like that, but they could apply for citizenship at some point in time if they wanted to. It'd take about 18 years before they could become a citizen. And they had to stay employed in the dairy industry for like 8 years, or not the dairy industry, but in the ag industry for like 8 years afterwards. So someone's calling us.
Oh my God.
But it's a good bill. Is it perfect? I kind of doubt it. There will be things in there that if you pass this and implement it, you go, yeah, maybe we should have done that, or that didn't work. But that's how you pass legislation. You get something done, you think it's good, you think it's going to work, and then you implement it and you see how it works. And we limited it to the ag industry because the larger it gets and the more industries you try to create, then you include more groups of people, more unions, more whatever that you got to negotiate,
whatever it might be,
and it becomes almost impossible. And what we said is, let's pass this. See if we can make it work. See if it works like we intended. And if it does, then we can expand it to the processors. Then we can expand it to construction or to hospitality industry or something else.
I know time is very limited. A quick question, and again, I've heard bills similar to this. It sounds like you're saying that one of the criticisms that I'm trying to get at is people say, hey, look, if you just grant people, a permanent background fine, the whole bit, then that's going to reward people that, just came over 6 months ago. But it sounds like you have a timeline threshold where you're like, no, You have to have been here for X amount of years working in this specific industry. Everything has to be squeaky clean on your record. So it does give a somewhat of a check against people like rushing across the border or flooding in. So it's essentially, if you weren't here in 2017 working consistently this whole time, and again, that doesn't include people that came over and didn't engage in gainful employment. So you have to be here 2017 or before, you had to be in this sector, you got to be employed, all these things, and then you will be considered.
Yep. That's exactly right. It is. If you look back at, I think it was 1986 when they did what was called Simpson-Mazzoli, I think was the name of the bill. It wasn't this Simpson, it was another one. It was Alan Simpson from Wyoming. They did a provision, they did what was then called an amnesty bill, where they gave amnesty to people who were here illegally, and in return what they were going to get is stronger border enforcement. And what happened is, just before that went into effect, everybody flooded across the border because they were going to get amnesty, even if they just came yesterday. And so they came for the amnesty, and we never got the border enhancement protections and stuff. So we learned from that. That wasn't a good way to do it. That's why there are provisions in here that you have to be employed in agriculture, and it has to have been for a period of time. It can't be you can't be just for a month or two or a year. It has to be for like 8 years. You have to be employed in agriculture and stuff.
Gotcha.
And, you know, 90% of these people that think we're giving amnesty to people, if they went out and we should just kick them out of the country, if they actually went out and talked to some of these people that are working on these dairy farms and stuff that are undocumented, would understand that they're just good people trying to do a job, trying to make a living, trying to raise a family. And, you know, it just makes sense. It's good for our economy, frankly.
Yeah. Listen, I know it's a working day. You got to go. Thank you for making the time. Is there anything you'd like to say here at the end?
It's good to be back in session. It's good to be back at work.
Yeah, I bet it is. Thank you. We'll do it again.
You bet.